Ever think about what makes NASCAR drivers compete so hard against each other? In all of it, Daytona 500 champion tells the rest of the story. Geoff Bodine tells the fascinating story of his long career. One part brings back Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s fiery emotions. But what's the story behind this really bad fight? Today we're going to talk about the pages where the famous fights between the Intimidator and Bodine happened. From heated arguments to fights on the track, dive into the heart-pounding drama that shaped their troubled relationship. Come with us on an exciting ride through the turns and twists of NASCAR's most exciting competition. Rivalries are a big part of NASCAR, but perhaps none were as heated as the one shared by Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Geoff Bodine. The two drivers would often collide on the track and wreck each other, forcing NASCAR to take stringent steps. However, while it turns out that Bodine may have let go of his animosity towards the Intimidator, he did not do the same. Dale Earnhardt Jr. strongly refuted that claim in a recent episode of the Dale Jr. Download podcast. Geoff Bodine's new book, All of It Daytona 500 Champion Tells the Rest of the Story, goes deep into his long and successful career and paints a lively picture of both triumph and tragedy. Many people have called it a gem, but there are rumors in the NASCAR community that the story wasn't just the author's way of thinking about things. There is a story in it that makes rivalries worse, especially between Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Geoff Bodine. It brings up again how tense things were between Bodine and his famous father, the Intimidator. People told stories about how intense their fights were on the track, and race officials often had to step in. However, Bodine's book portrayal of his fearsome enemy is surprisingly kind, which was not what was expected. But Earnhardt Jr. finds something strange about the last few lines of this chapter, which is why he talks about it freely on his podcast. According to Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s impassioned tirade, there's a chapter on my dad called The Intimidator, where he speaks really well of Dad. He shares his version of events, but he doesn't take it too far in his criticism of Dad, and he ends the chapter with comments on how Dad impacted the sport in an incredible way. But the very last sentence of that chapter is, "And I found out after Dale's death that he actually hated me." That's the last sentence of the chapter. I'm like, where's the context? Who told you that? Maybe I could argue that point. I don't believe that to be true. Did Dad have an opinion of Geoff? Yes. Did he like everything he did on the racetrack? No. But after 20 years of not racing each other, I'm sure that he didn't hate him. So now let's take a look at the background of Dale Earnhardt and Geoff Bodine and the relationship between them. Dale Earnhardt and Geoff Bodine both entered the Winston Cup Series around the same period. Bodine embarked on his rookie career in 1979, coinciding with Dale's debut. But Bodine's rookie stint was brief. As Bodine secured his first full-time ride, Dale had already established himself as a formidable weekly contender and the 1980 champion. Off the track, they shared a friendship. Bodine's family visited Dale's lake house, where their children played together, riding go-karts. Bodine reminisced an amusing incident when Dale jokingly claimed reimbursement for worn-out tires on Dale Jr.'s go-kart. Their camaraderie extended beyond the track, enjoying several dinners together and fostering a unique bond. However, competing against each other altered their dynamic subtly. Bodine recounted a conversation, saying, "I'll never forget Dale came to the track one day and said, 'Hey, you owe me some money.' And I said, 'What do you mean?' And he said, 'Well, your kid wore the tires off of Dale Jr.'s go-kart. I need some new tires.'" That really shows how friendly they were back then. After Geoff Bodine transitioned to Hendrick Motorsports and began winning races, the dynamics shifted. Invitations to dinners ceased, and the children no longer played together as they once did. Over the years, their on-track rivalry was well documented, portrayed vividly in the film Days of Thunder. Donning their helmets and stepping into their race cars, their competitive spirit ignited. While Dale Earnhardt earned the moniker the Intimidator from fans, Geoff affectionately dubbed him the Eliminator. His aggressive racing style, particularly in the final laps of a race, endeared him to fans and promoters alike. The spectacle filled grandstands and boosted television ratings, garnering widespread admiration. During the mid-1980s and early 1990s, Dale and Geoff were at the forefront of on-track clashes, often stirring controversy akin to scenes from Days of Thunder. The meeting with NASCAR's Bill France Jr. depicted in the film was based on a real encounter between Dale and Geoff after a race weekend at Charlotte Motor Speedway. Despite their rivalry, mutual respect endured. Dale never visited Victory Lane when Bodine won, nor did Bodine when Dale triumphed. Yet this mutual understanding underscored their shared disdain for defeat. Dale was known for getting along well with other drivers and making friends with everyone in the racing world. Even though he was happy off the track, he was relentless behind the wheel and wasn't afraid to stand up to any rival. Geoff Bodine talked about a meeting and said, "When I saw his car in my rearview mirror, I kept my mind on the race. I didn't give up easily like some drivers did. I wasn't scared of anyone because I had raced hard my whole life. When I saw the number 3 coming up, I got ready for battle." Bodine went on to talk about their battles on the track. "Even after he caused a crash or a spin, I hoped he'd be careful next time, but he always surprised me. If I were to give him the benefit of the doubt, he would use his bumper to get ahead." But once they got off the track, the anger went away. Even though they were strong competitors, they forgot about the fights they had on the track and developed a mutual respect that went beyond the intensity of racing. Bodine related one more story that you might find interesting. In Mooresville, North Carolina, Geoff's brother Todd ran a ranch, and Geoff himself kept a pair of horses on the property. It seemed only natural that Dale, being a rancher and horse enthusiast, would have Todd's land bordering his own. On one occasion, Dale and Dale Jr. came up and Todd and Geoff got on the horses and went for a little ride. Dale didn't knock Geoff off his horse or throw him off his balance, by the way. All they did was enjoy themselves. Bodine continued, "There's no question Winston Cup racing would ever be the same after Dale's death. It was heartbreaking to no longer see the black number 3 on pit road or in the rearview mirror. Things would have altered when he retired." He mentioned that Dale's generosity to those in need outside of the racing world was one of his lesser-known but most admirable qualities. Those who were stuck, impoverished, or in need of transportation would be given rides in his plane by him. He wasn't trying to win anyone over or gain their esteem. When it came to that, he was an honest and decent human being. I call him the Exterminator because of the change in appearance that occurred when he donned the helmet. Bodine said, "I'm grateful to have lived during the same era as Dale Earnhardt because he revolutionized NASCAR racing. I have no doubt that NASCAR would still be around if he hadn't played a role, but there's no denying that he propelled the sport to new heights. I miss him even though he threw me for a loop multiple times." To Dale Earnhardt Jr., the idea that his father had a grudge against Geoff Bodine is hard to understand. When the 49-year-old talked about memories they both had, he talked about how their families used to get together by the lake. This showed how close the two NASCAR stars were. Before there was any sign of competition, Dale Jr. and Geoff Bodine were really good friends. Their families spent a lot of time together. Dale Jr. remembers happily the times they had fun together at the lake house, playing with Bodine's kids and going for swims while their dads talked over meals. Dale Jr. said, "Dad and Geoff would hang out and have dinners." This showed how friendly they were at first, which is typical of relationships between drivers. There are still no clear answers to the unanswered questions of whether Dale Earnhardt Jr. was still angry at Geoff Bodine up until the end of his life. In the comments, let us know what you think about it. We think the fact that there are different stories keeps fans interested, which is part of the sport's draw. And also click that bell icon to get all the latest NASCAR news.